Welcome to another episode of Unscripted with Marilyn Morales. Today is a very special show, and I know you guys hear me say that all the time. Special. But this one is. Wait till you hear who my guest is. I met my next guest not that long ago in January when my book came out. She was at my business boot camp. I heard her speak. She was one of the speakers that joined the competition. And I was fixated as she was speaking about who she was and what she had gone through. And I knew then, number one, that I had to buy her book. Number two, that I needed to know more about her. And I was recently, once again, in the same virtual room with her. And I was like, you got to be on my show. I have to have you. So who is my next guest? Her name is Lizzie Enns. Lizzie is a former Amish girl who chose to jump for a better life and future. Now board certified nutrition practitioner, personal trainer, author, and speaker on a mission to make an impact. Lizzie helps people get more energy, get better sleep, and rebalance their hormones, which I need to know more about, by focusing on whole body healing so their body can function at its best. Let's welcome Lizzie to the show.
Hello. Hi.
Listen, you are so amazing. So amazing. And as I mentioned, when I heard you speak, I don't know what that word is, but I was like a little girl in amazement, just listening to you. And right after that, I wanted to go buy the book, and somebody said, here, grab this book. You keep talking about Lizzie, and her book is fantastic, and you have to read it. So tell everybody, what's the name of your book?
The book is name is Escaping My Reflection, a pilgrimage, and then a pilgrimage from suppression to freedom.
From suppression to freedom. And guys, listen, I have a lot of notes here, but look at that cover.
There it is.
Look at that cover. Amazing, impactful, so many adjectives that I can use to describe this book. And when I started reading it, I couldn't put it down. I had to force myself to put it down to get things done. But in 2 days, read. Done.
Thank you for that. That's so amazing. I love hearing that feedback because it's really important for me to know also like what the reader's getting from it and how it touches their life, because that was the whole purpose of the book to begin with. Is I didn't want to write a book just to write a book. It needed to make an impact and help other people change their lives. So I appreciate that.
Of course. Listen, I think you're going to hear that a lot because you have a unique perspective that a lot of us don't. Now, share with my viewers, what was that point in your life where you knew life was changing for you, would never be the same?
It was the day that I was sitting on a roof, a 15-foot roof, that I was deciding whether or not I jump off that roof and leave my entire family and community behind in life, everything that I had ever known up until the age of 19. I needed to make a very pivotal decision and move on whether or not I jump or I don't jump.
Right. And what were some of the things that were making you want to jump?
Lots of them, but
the main one, like, what were you feeling? Bring me to that day. And I think that was the first thing. Let me get to it. I remember the intro is jumping off the roof of summer night in Ohio, right? So you were living in Ohio, and we all know that warm, but not too warm, with a light breeze rippling through the trees and the cicadas singing in the background. So you're in this. You're sitting there taking this goosebumps. All in.
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah. And you know, amazing. This first page to me, when I read it, I was like, oh my God. You're taking every single moment in. This reminded me of the day that it was my last day at work before I got married. And I knew that my life was going to change moving forward, right? I was 25 years old at the time, so much older than you were at 19. I can't even imagine 19. And all I was doing was getting married. I wasn't jumping off a roof. I wasn't
Hey,
going to
that's
change
still a
my
big
whole
decision.
world. It's a huge decision. But I remember
Mhm.
thinking, I need to take in everything. I want to remember this day, my one of my last days of being single, of being just a girl, right? And I wanted to take it in. And I remember the birds chirping, how everything looked, the weather, it was, I got married in September. So it was in September, it was, starting to become fall. And I remember taking all that in. So I could just imagine you on a rooftop, contemplating, do I jump? Do I not jump?
Or if I do jump, am I going to break a bone and then be stuck there for the rest of my life? And the entire community is going to find out that I was about to run away. And they're going to say, well, that's what you get for wanting to run away. And now you're stuck here. That's literally what they would say. So all of that was going through my mind, but also in my heart and my soul. Like I knew it was what I needed to do, even though I knew I was going to leave my entire family and community behind. And I have a twin sister, and she was getting married 6 months later. I knew that. And I knew if I jump and leave, I would not be at her wedding.
Right.
So I had to decide whether or not I jump then and leave and take my chance, or if I stay 6 more months and think that I might leave then, which I knew that if I waited 6 more months, I probably would never leave. So I had to take that chance.
And you also wouldn't get that opportunity. So somebody was helping you to leave, right?
Yes.
You had somebody who had, tell me the story. Tell us the story.
Yes. So I was dating a guy from New York at the time. I was in Ohio. He was in New York. And people always go like, well, you guys didn't fly. How did you get to another state? I'm like, we used the Greyhound bus.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah, we had the Greyhound bus and we traveled from state to state like that. And I met him because a brother of mine got married to his wife in New York. And so we went there for a wedding. That's where I met him. We started dating, but we only saw each other like a couple times a year. And then we would write letters to each other, kind of like pen pals, like every other week I sent him a letter and then he would send me a letter. And at that particular time and that specific date, June 19th, 2004, it was my turn to go deliver a letter to him. And I was working at my oldest sister's house. So I wasn't even at home where I grew up. I was at my oldest sister's, and I went to deliver the letter in the mailbox around noon. And when I opened the mailbox to put the letter in, there was a note in there that was labeled to me. And it was from him. I recognized the handwriting and I was like, well, this is interesting. It doesn't have an address. It only has my name on it. And so I rip open the note and he says, my sister and her boyfriend and I drove down from New York yesterday with a mutual friend of ours. We ran away. We left. If you want to leave, we'll come by here tonight at 10 p.m. We'll pick you up. And if you don't want to leave, then I'll come by later and I'll talk to you about it. And I'm like, that was kind of his way of saying, like, if you don't leave, like, we're breaking up.
Right. Well, no, maybe we'll talk about this later. He did say, hey, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. But I like snapped my fingers and said, I'm leaving. I didn't even think twice about it because I knew when I was 17, my twin and I ran away for 2 days. And I only went back because she went back. I was devastated because I knew in my heart and soul I didn't belong there. So for 2 years, I'm still there, knowing that I don't belong there, knowing that I don't want to be there and I can't see my future there. But I'm just kind of going through the motions of everything. I even got baptized as a member of the church. And then I'm integrated into the church and I get to know more about how the church actually runs and how they're treating people and how they view God and how they're teaching who God is. And I was like, I can't agree with this. I can't get on board with this. And so for 2 years, that's what was happening. But a couple months leading up to me actually leaving, I knew in my spirit and in my soul, I could feel that something big was about to shift and something was going to happen. I just didn't know what it was.
Until this
because
opportunity came up.
yeah, until this opportunity came up. But it was almost as if God was preparing me for that moment, like saying like, hey girl, it's time to go. Your time's coming. And he was like preparing me for that shift. And so when the opportunity came, I didn't have to think about it because it was like, this is my way out. I'm ready. So I had the rest of the day to figure out how I'm going to do it, because I can't tell anybody that I'm going to run away and leave. And so I went back down and pretended like everything was fine. I had lunch with the family and I was really quiet and I could barely eat, but I just kind of went about my day. And then I, excuse me, waited until nighttime. I had a frog in my throat. Excuse me. I waited until nighttime. It was time to go to bed. And then I go upstairs and I pretend like I'm going to go to bed just like everybody else and like every other night. But when I got up there, I like took my covering off and I wrote a little note for my family and I said, I'm leaving. It has nothing to do with anybody here, but I have to go. And I left that little note. I put $20. I had $20. I put $20 bill in my pocket, a flashlight, a couple little things. And then I got out onto the roof. And that is where that moment was, where I sat there for about 30 minutes contemplating how I'm going to jump off that roof.
And how do you know what time he was coming for you?
He's at 10 o'clock.
He said 10 o'clock. So you knew 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
You had to be up there.
Yeah. And before I was even out on the roof, he was already up on top of the hill with a flashlight, kind of like letting me know that they were already up there. So they waited quite a bit because I had to figure out how I'm going to jump off that roof without breaking a bone.
And without, other people calling attention, right? Because you're going to make noise. In the book, you talk about there's a dog who's barking.
Yep.
And there's all this stuff going on. And you're like, oh, Lord.
Yeah.
I'm going to get caught,
like, I'm going to be caught. And like, it's such an intense moment. And to this day, I'm like, I had no idea how much that moment was going to mean to me later on in my life. Because now when I like think back to that, I'm like, that was like the craziest, most intense, but defining moment ever
of your life, right? Mm-hmm. There was no turning back. You talk in your book about before that at night, you would get like woken up. Like you kept getting woken up. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So for a couple weeks leading up to that night of leaving, I would go to bed at night and just, you know how it feels when you're like just about drifting off into your sleep. And then sometimes you get woke up and sometimes you don't know that it's happening. You just like your body relaxes and you go to sleep. Well, for about 2 weeks leading up to that, every single night that I would go to bed, as I was drifting off into that sleep, it would feel like someone was taking the bottom of my bed and just like picking it up and shaking it. And it would like wake me up out of my sleep. And it would happen multiple times each night. And I was scared to death because I was like, oh my gosh, is God like punishing me because I'm thinking about leaving? Like, what is this?
And were you alone in the room?
Mm-hmm.
So nobody else saw this
no,
or experienced this with you.
No, right, and it was like I was also doing some things that weren't allowed within the community, like listening to music, and I had a camera.
God forbid.
Like,
God forbid you should listen to music, right?
I know,
but
right?
in the Bible, there's all this kind of music, right?
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because of what we're taught, like those things are bad and you're going to hell if you have those things. And, God is like up in the sky, ready to beat you over the head if you disobey. That's the God they teach you who he is. And so because I was doing some of those things, I was like, am I being punished for doing these things? But I know now that's not what it was. And it wasn't until I was writing the book that I remembered that. And I was like, oh my gosh, he was getting me ready. He was telling me, sister, it's time to go. You don't belong here anymore.
It's time. Yours was very dramatic because your bed is shaking. But it happens to a lot of us. When your life is about to change, And for me, I can reflect on many times that I was awoken in the middle of the night where I would just wake up out of a sound sleep and it was 3 o'clock in the morning.
Hmm.
Always 3 o'clock in the morning. And I would
You
be
know
like,
that's
what?
God's
I'm like,
hour.
well, I'm sorry?
You know that's God's hour.
That's God's hour. I found out after that because I said to
Yeah.
someone, I keep being awakened at 3 o'clock in the morning for no reason. And this was
Hmm.
as I was going through my journey with my daughter who was sick with cancer, right? I was in the
Hmm.
hospital when this first started happening to me. So at 3 o'clock
Wow.
in the morning, I'd do this and then look over at the clock and it's 3 o'clock and it's 3 o'clock. And it was every day, every day, every day. So I was like, you know what? It's my time to pray. It's my time to pray. Something is happening, whatever this journey is. And, this happened in the beginning when we were first in the hospital. And we were there for a year. Right.
Hmm.
So 3 o'clock in the morning was an everyday occurrence. And I started to learn to talk to God at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
This was when we had conversation. So dramatic in a different way, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the
Yeah.
same time. But I learned after that. So, and I could reflect back a lot of times where I was awoken in the middle of the night during other times in my life, but not
Hmm.
knowing what that was,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Just thinking it was a random. Why am I being awoken at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Hmm.
So yes, pivotal times in our lives when life is about to change. You talk about faith, right? And you have a belief in God, but not in any kind of organized religion. Do you
Correct.
feel that you always had a relationship with God as a teenager, as a child? Because your level of understanding of what these things are. Speak to me about that.
Yes. So I knew about God when I was growing up because they teach you about God, but they don't necessarily teach you how to have a relationship with Him.
Mhm.
But I do remember when I was in my teenage years and I was getting bullied for various different things from my siblings. I remember being so much pain and so devastated. Like we weren't given we had German Bibles, so it was really hard to understand them.
Mhm.
But and we didn't read them a lot as kids. It was more like a parent type of thing. But I remember reading something somewhere where it says, go to your closet and pray. And so I would sometimes, when I was in so much pain and I felt so alone, I would literally go to my closet and I would just like get down on my knees and like talk to God and just like cry out to him, not really knowing anything about who he really is and how you can have a relationship and the true God. I just knew that that's what it said. And so I know he heard me. I didn't understand it at the time, but now I do.
Yeah.
So
Now you can
um
look back on it and see that
mhm.
because the God that they taught you about was scary. He was a
Oh,
scary person.
he was a very scary person, and it takes a long time to unravel all of that. You kind of have to start pulling back the layers of the onion of all the religious trauma per se, the cultish beliefs and all of those kinds of rules that aren't even meant to be there.
Right.
And you have to like really it, heal from that, but also relearn, because you can't just say, okay, I need to heal from that and not replace it with something that is better and healthier. So that
Right.
understanding of it, you have to understand that he's not that kind of God. He's a loving God and he will never leave you. And you can't do anything to make him not love you.
Right. At what point in your life did you realize that? When did you learn that? How old were you when you started to learn that?
She's probably in my 30s.
Yesterday? Nah.
Yesterday, last week,
Last week I learned this.
last week, 2 weeks ago. Like, oh, if I make, because a friend of mine said this to me. She goes, if your child does something that, and this was a conversation she had with God, if your child does something that is like disobeying to you, and they didn't follow your rules or they did something they shouldn't have, do you stop loving them? And she's like, well, no. And he's like, okay, so why would I do that to you?
Mhm.
Because she went through a phase in her life where she thought if she made this one decision, then she couldn't have God, because she made a decision to go a certain direction in her life. And it took her 5 years to kind of come back to him. And then he showed her that he never left her.
Very
And that's when
impactful.
that's when he showed her that. He's like, why would I leave you? I never leave you. It's our choice whether or not we allow him to come in, and we put up walls because we think that we've done something that makes him not love us anymore. And
Or
that's
we're
just not true.
ashamed. Or we're ashamed. So that's really deep.
Yeah.
And I think that, motherhood, fatherhood, and when you have a child of your own can change your perspective on a lot of things. Absolutely, because
Yes.
we never, and even as a daughter, you're not going to think the same way as a mother. It changes,
Correct.
right? Once you become a mother,
Mm-hmm.
you change completely and you go, oh my God,
Yep.
now I understand. I get
Yep.
it.
Yep.
I
Yep.
understand. And having that relationship with God is so key and important because yeah,
Yeah.
it's always us that we lose our way. I
Mm.
call myself a cradle Catholic. I was born a Catholic, right? I had this whole, at one point I wanted to be a nun, but that's a story
That's
for
awesome.
another day.
I love it. I love it. I
When
love
you
it.
interview me, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll
Let's
tell you
do it.
that story. Yeah. I think that's a funny story. But yeah, so I had that faith like that, but then things happen along the way as you grow up and you make different choices in your life, and you're like, well, I start to question. I became a nurse at
Mhm.
17, and I started to question God because back then in the 80s, when I was becoming a nurse, AIDS was the viral epidemic that was in the world,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
And I was like, everybody, does this sound familiar to you guys? I was like, because it was a virus that we couldn't understand how God would allow people to become sick and die like this. How could a
Mm,
God that's a loving God allow this to happen?
yeah.
Right? But it's not him that's doing it. Right? It's not him. So
Yeah, and
it's us.
something that he showed me a few weeks ago as I was going through something kind of difficult, and he goes, Lizzie, I don't make you do anything you don't want to do. And I said, oh. Because where I'm from and what I've been taught for so many years is like, if you just follow the rules, like you'll be okay. And I have to catch myself even now to this day to be careful that I don't think like that. Sometimes it's like, oh, if I break this rule, then I'm doomed. And, he's going to leave me and he's going to love me less. And that's just not the case. He's always going to love you.
That's right.
Now, are there going to
Rules.
be things that you do that breaks his heart? Of course. But
Right.
when we choose to do things that break his heart, it's he also forgets, right? So the reason that it breaks his heart is because he knows that it's going to hurt us.
Words out of my mouth. You just took the words out of my mouth. It's because we're harming ourselves,
Yeah.
and we don't, and he doesn't want us to harm ourselves by the decisions that we make.
Yeah.
And it's us. We have free will. We can do whatever it is. And rules, we have to be careful with what the rules are, because
Mm-hmm.
I always say if the reason I made this decision was out of love, it's the reason why you do what you do. I did it out of love, or I did it out of anger. What was the motive behind the decision
Mm-hmm.
that I made?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's what's important,
Yep.
because decisions that you make that may not be popular, but you did it out of love, right? Is a forgivable one.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
and it harms no
Mm-hmm.
one. Harm no one is my rule, right? The golden
Yeah.
rule. Harm no one, do things with love, and that will guide you on your decision making.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward now. We talk about bullying, right? And I want to get back to that, because a lot of times when we talk about bad things that happen to us, we always think stranger danger, the people that are out there
Mm.
that are going to come and get us. Yet you were so sheltered, and the people that came and got you were your own people,
Yeah.
your own family members that were causing all this damage. What advice would you give somebody who is experiencing something like this within their own family?
Within their own family, I think that depending on where you're at, it can be difficult to say, okay, I'm leaving and I need to like disassociate myself from the family. And one of the things that I see is it feels like it's harder for someone in the modern world, if that's what we want to call it,
Yeah.
to disassociate themselves from their family, because for me, I left the entire community. I literally ran away. And so I see a difference there because I basically like disassociated myself completely. Whereas I've seen where people in the modern world, they're like, okay, I know I need to like let go of my family and it's toxic and I need to leave. And some people do it very successfully. But then I've also seen other people where they try to do it, but it's just incredibly hard for them to do it, no matter how toxic and painful it is. And I think that if you are in that situation where you're like, I know that this family situation isn't helping me and it's only hurting me, then you have to make a decision whether or not you're going to leave and say, okay, I can create my own new family that might not be blood family, but it's a different type of family that's going to be there for me and support me and love me. And the blood family has to go because they're not helping you and they're only hurting you. That's a very pivotal, painful moment that you have to get to. And sometimes you have to sit with it for a bit to be like, all right, weigh out the pros and cons. What's this going to look like and how will it affect me for the rest of my life? If you have kids, you got to consider your kids. How's that going to affect your kids? Right. Or if you are a child and you're in your teenage years or early 20s, but you're an adult, like, what does that look like? I mean, I was 19. So if I was 19 and I had $20 in my pocket and I could completely like run away and not have any kind of support from my family, and I had some friends, you know, outside of that I got to know and they helped me, but everything that I did from there, as far as making a life out of a brand new life out of my life, I built because I went to work and I got a paycheck and I just kept building and building and building from there. So if I can do that without a social security number and
yeah, you
more
can do
than
it, right?
$20,
you find your way.
You just find your way. Yep.
It's going to be hard. It's hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody said this was going to be an easy path,
Nope.
right? You're jumping off that roof. And it's
That's
like,
right.
This life is so painful that it was worse to think of staying than leaving. And you had an opportunity because you had a support that was out there that was going to help you. So you were ready when the opportunity arises. So be ready for an opportunity. Think your way through it. Hard work. It's not going to be easy. Opportunities are not going to come to you. You have to seek out the ways to get through this. And those are all the things that you did. And that's why you're successful. And that's the message that I want people to hear, that you have to be your own advocate. You have to find your own way. And you can't be afraid of hard work at all.
And you have to have your own back too. And something that I literally discovered a few weeks ago, it was just like planted it in my head. It's like when the thought of staying is more painful than the thought of leaving, then you know it's time to go.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Now, you also mentioned here that there were 3 things you learned that you wanted to share with people in this book. What were those 3 things?
That is a great question. I haven't read my book in a while, so I got to make sure that I say the right 3 things.
You said take away 3 things. You're on page 74.
Page 74. I've got it. Trust yourself. I got it. Good thing I got a book right here. Number 1 is you have to trust yourself. Like if you can't trust yourself, then you're putting all your trust in other people. And one of the things that I've learned over many years is like, if you only put your trust in other people, then where's that going to take you? But if you can learn how to trust yourself and say, okay, I got this. I can do this. I'm equipped to do this. God brought me here for a reason. He's not going to let me down. I got it. So put your trust in you, trust yourself. And then 2 is don't be afraid to get uncomfortable, because it's within the discomfort that you're going to learn and grow. Listen, I have been in some very uncomfortable places and so have many, many other people. But one of the things that I have learned in that discomfort is allowing myself to feel it, to feel the pain, to feel the emotions. And it's within those moments that things are discovered, that things are learned. And then it's kind of like, chiseling down on that piece of you where it's like makes you stronger every single time that you're going through that. And then number 3 is you have to have an open heart and mind and a desire to learn. So I've always had kind of this curious mind. I always asked questions of like, well, why are we doing things this way? Why do you believe that way? And if you want to grow, like you have to educate yourself, obviously, but you have to have this desire of like, I want to learn, I want to grow, and I want to become a better person. And in doing so, you have to surround yourself with good people that are going to be there for you. And they have maybe been through or similar things that you're going through, and they know what that's like. But also, one of the things that I did is I surrounded myself with people a few years after I left that had a completely different experience in life than I did. And the reason that I did that is because I saw that they would be able to teach me things that I knew that I wanted to know. And I wanted to be surrounded with those people. So in business, it's kind of the same idea. If you're in business and you're like, all right, I want to grow in business, surround yourself with other entrepreneurs and other people that either have gone through or are going through what you are, and they can help you. I like to surround myself with people that have done the things that I want to do, and they can help me grow in that aspect and arena and area that I want to grow in. But you have to, even just in personal life, like church, whether it's church or life coaches or health coaches or whatever it is, whatever area it is that you want to get better at, like look for those people that can help you with that.
Absolutely. That all goes together, and having that open mind and heart. And when you get there, when you see that and you're uncomfortable, a lot of times when the people in the room are smarter than us, we're uncomfortable. We feel like we don't belong there. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the exact room that you want to be in.
Yes.
Because that's going to allow for the biggest growth.
It's uncomfortable, but it's where growth happens.
It's necessary where the growth
Yes.
happens. So talk to me about now. Where are you now? What are you doing? You mentioned about balancing hormones. You need to talk to me about that.
Yes, we can talk about that. I am in Arizona now, and I am a Board Certified Functional Nutrition Practitioner, and all my program is all online. I'm also a personal trainer. I used to train at a private training studio here for 6 years before I went online in 2020, like a lot of people did. So that's when I launched my business online. And then I actually went back to school after I started my business and studied functional nutrition. And that's when I really started to dive into the hormone stuff. And I love that stuff. Hormones, thyroid, healing the gut. But the way that I work with people is I take a functional approach to it and look at the body as a whole. So I'm looking at like, what is missing? So I do labs for people, and then I go through those labs and I look for missing pieces. You're a nurse, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the functional field, the way that we look at labs is like, okay, we're going to, instead of looking for diagnosis, we're going to look at the whole entire panel and connect dots of, okay, where's their deficiencies that need to be brought into sufficiency, and bring the whole picture together. And then I pair that with their nutrition plan and their exercise plan and what their sleep and water and all of that stuff is supposed to look like or should look like. And that's how I help them. Yeah.
That's fabulous. I used to be obsessed with labs, right? Because I said it would always give me a picture of what my patient really was. Not this, but I would be obsessed with every time the lab would come over. Give me those labs. I want to read them. Right? Because I wanted to see. Yes. I want to see what are we missing, because they're not getting better. So what are we missing? Right. So we would do, and unfortunately, we don't do a full panel lab. I'm sure that you're more focused labs.
Right? I do. I want to see where their inflammation markers are at. I want to see some of the basic stuff like your CMP, CPC, lipid panel, A1s. Like those are always standards regulars that are included. But then I go more in depth with the hormones and the thyroid and checking if there's any kind of autoimmune activity going on, and then the way that the thyroid works is the thyroid works is like I teach people like with the thyroid, even with hormones, like it's never just a thyroid problem or a hormone problem. There's downstream problems that are happening of why the thyroid's not functioning the way that it should be. So your cholesterol is going to be connected to that. Your liver is going to be connected to that. Your inflammation. Yes. So all of it is connected, because I'm assuming you know this, but like 60% of your thyroid conversion happens in the liver. So if the liver is not functioning very well, okay, what is happening with the thyroid?
Right. And a lot of people with a hypothyroid, I myself, hypothyroid since I'm 30 years old, right? So
Yeah.
then your liver gets affected by that. Whenever my thyroid levels are off, all of a sudden my liver levels are off,
Yeah.
right? And we see my cholesterol is high.
Yes.
And I would say to the doctor, I need an adjustment in my medication. Even though it's within this normal range, I need an adjustment because that's why this is off. You're not going to give me cholesterol medication because I know it has to do with this.
Yeah.
Right. But it's difficult to become your own advocate. Right. And it's difficult to talk to the physicians, and you know your body best. I know that something is off, but it's difficult. So do you train people on having these conversations with their doctors?
We do talk a little bit about that. I actually just had a conversation with a client the other day, and she had to go see a doctor because she needs to see an endocrinologist. Mm-hmm. And she was talking to me about how she was able to advocate for herself because I had educated her on specific things on her labs and what to look out for. Because I'm able to do the labs and walk them through all of the things. But then if there's something very specific that comes up, I'm like, all right, I need you to go see a doctor about this. Like, and so that's what she was doing, but she was able to advocate for herself and say, like, listen, I really don't want to go on this medication. Like, what's our other option? And before, she wouldn't have been able to do that. So being able to understand like how to ask the right questions from the doctor, and then also kind of fight back if they're like, hey, I'm going to put you on cholesterol medication. And you're like, I haven't even tried anything with my diet and lifestyle. Like,
right. I was like, how about I just stop eating this bad stuff?
Yeah. So like, if you have not done any of that, and they're like,
they want to go straight to medication. Straight to medication. And
with cholesterol, there's so much you can do to change those numbers just with diet and exercise in your lifestyle. For some people, it can be hereditary. I literally had a conversation with a girl a few weeks ago, and her mom has had hereditary high cholesterol for years, and she would never even know. And so they did some kind of test where they were able to see the size of her veins, and they said it's literally just because her veins are so small that's the reason why her cholesterol is high. And I was like, wow, that's really, really interesting.
That is interesting. I don't know what test that is. I have to find out.
I don't know either. I don't know either. I don't know what it is. I think they were working with a specialist, and they did very specific tests to find out, like, okay, she looks healthy. She is healthy. She eats really healthy. It's why is this happening? And so they did this specific test to find out what the size of her veins are. And they're like, oh yeah, this is why.
This is great. So tell me, what does your ideal client look like?
Ideal client is someone that has gone to the doctor and they've said, your labs are fine. Everything's fine. You're okay. But they feel like shit. And, and they're tired all the time. They're not sleeping and they can't lose weight. They're bloated all the time. Like, all of those things. Like, I swear, like every consultation call that I get on, it's like the same thing. It's like, all right, these things happen. I've tried everything and it's not working. And so those are the people that come to me.
Oh Lord. Now, what is your average time that you spend with them? And when you're coaching somebody, what's the time frame that you
minimum is 12 weeks. And that's like 12 weeks is my program. And then, people have an option if they want to continue on. If they're like, hey, I don't feel like I can be on my own yet, they can continue on if they want to. So I have some people that are here with me for 12 weeks, some for 6 months. I have one girl that's been with me for over a year and she just likes it. We talk.
You're friends now.
Yeah. Well, it's not actually just that. She actually has some very specific ongoing health things that, she doesn't have her parents, and I'm probably kind of like that parent to her where it's like a sounding board of like, all right, what should we do here? And so I think that's a big piece of it. But so anyway, I got kind of carried.
Do you ever do groups? Like where you
I did launch groups every like 2 or 3 times a year a couple years ago. And then the last time that I launched one, everybody that came to me for consultations, they're like, no, I don't want group. I just want one-on-one, even though it's like double the price. And I'm like, okay. So I don't know, like I may do like a summer group. I'm not sure yet. I was kind of contemplating on that the other day. thinking, I wonder if I should do that. So
I'm feeling
something
that you should.
Yeah, I'm kind of feeling it too.
Yeah, I'm feeling that
Yeah.
you should. So guys, you're going to hear it right here. All right.
We
Time
just
for an
like
update.
manifested that out there.
Yeah. I feel like it needs to happen. And guess what? Marilyn Morales is going to go to you, and we're going to do our labs, and we're going to go right here live, and we're going to read my labs. Show people what it's like.
That's right. Yeah, it's very in depth.
You have to be your own advocate. You have to learn your own body. Nobody knows you but you, right? And it could be something that's slightly off. One little thing can make everything go off. So how can people get a hold of you?
Yes.
Share that with our viewers.
Yeah. In the little bar down here, there's Lizzie at undietyourself.live. That's my email. And then LizzieYuns.com is my website. That's primarily for my book. And
everybody get that book.
Yeah. Yes, get that book. I'm actually going to Vermont next week to record the Audible. So
so it's going to be on Audible, everybody. Yeah, absolutely.
Later this year. That's going to be good. And then Lizzie and _wellness is my Instagram, and I'm very active on there. So that's a really good place to connect with me as well.
Perfect.
Yep.
And this is the question that I ask all of my guests. How do you define success?
So my definition of success, because I'm so passionate about what I do, is literally a word for word conversation I had with a client yesterday, 8 weeks in, and she's telling me all the things that have changed in her life. And she feels like a whole new person. And that's my mission. That's my purpose. And to me, it doesn't matter how much, some people, they define success based on their bank account. That's not me. Obviously, we have to make a living, and it makes our life easier. But if I can change someone's life by helping them figure out how to heal their body and feel better and, become a whole new glowing person, that is success to me.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on my show. This was truly a blessing, and I know it's going to bless so many others. And for my guests, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gabrielle Morales, and I am a recruitment coordinator for Be The Match. My journey with Be The Match actually began when I was only 9 years old. At that point, my 7-month-old baby sister was diagnosed with an extremely rare form of leukemia. Through the Be The Match registry, we were able to find a matching donor for my sister. And although a few months later, we lost her, her cancer was cured. Our family is so thankful for the additional months that we had with my sister. And ever since then, I've made a promise to myself to dedicate my life to helping children just like Isabella and helping families like ours by continuing her legacy. Hence why I now work for Be The Match. I love what I do so much, and I'm able to spread awareness about the huge need for more donors on the registry, especially those of diverse backgrounds. There is currently a huge disparity within the registry for minority patients, and we need your help. It is so simple to save a life and to be put on the registry. You can visit izzyslegacy.com or text Izzy's Legacy to the number 61474 to start the registration process to be on the Be The Match registry, to hopefully be a life-saving match for a searching patient in need.